It's a contradiction. They're not saying the same thing. One of them is telling the truth, one of them is not.
Discrepancies, conflicting accounts. This is now part of the Nolan Wells investigation. You're going to hear people ask whether someone is lying, which is very fair given the reporting. It's time to review the questions and the contradictions related to the case of Nolan Wells' death.
His friend's boat was sinking. Someone called for help and said, "Everybody is on board," except he wasn't on it. 2 days later, they pulled his body out of the water. And right now, this case is headed to a grand jury. If you're new here, welcome to Crime Files, the place where we break down cases like this one and try to make sense of what happened. Hit subscribe and tap that bell right now, because if you leave without doing that, you're going to miss the next case. And trust me, you don't want to miss what we cover on this channel. Okay, let's get into it. On July 4th, Nolan headed out with a group of friends, most of them white, for a boat trip to Horn Island. If you've never heard of Horn Island, it's not your typical beach hangout. It's a barrier island about 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, completely uninhabited. No houses, no stores, no lifeguards, no cell service, only reachable by private boat. And once you're there, you're on your own. On July 4th, it was packed, hundreds of people, boats everywhere. Nolan's best friend, Javon Williams, actually rode out on a separate boat because Nolan's boat was full. He said he saw Nolan as soon as he arrived on the island. For most of the day, it was just a normal holiday. Boats on the water, people swimming, everybody in the sun. His friend Traces Shepard later said the group had been drinking since late morning. This trip was supposed to be their one last hurrah before school and work picked back up. Somewhere in that crowd, Nolan met a young woman. Her name was Katie. Around 3 p.m., people start losing track of exactly where Nolan is. And this is where the story splits into two completely different directions. Katie says Nolan told her he was heading back to get on the boat with his friends. His friends say Nolan told them he was staying behind to hang out with Katie. Two totally different versions of the last real conversation anyone had with him. Nolan's parents have said themselves they still don't know which version is true. Then, around 4:30 p.m., the boat carrying Nolan's friends started taking on water. There's actual audio of this now. One of the guys on the boat called a private towing company, and you can hear him say, "Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're going. We're sinking. Can you all please come?" Dispatch asked if everyone on board is okay. He says, yeah, everybody is on board. Everybody, except Nolan. So picture it. A sinking boat, panic. People scrambling to get towed back to the mainland. And somewhere behind them, back on that remote island, Nolan Wells stays behind. Alone. Here's something that still bothers a lot of people about this case, including the investigators looking into it. Crime scene analyst Cheryl McCullum said it herself on national television. There were hundreds of people on that island that day. Boats everywhere, photos everywhere, video everywhere. And somehow, nobody saw what happened to Nolan after he split off from a friend group that knew him to go be with people who also knew him. "I don't understand how he got separated from everybody that he knows," she said. And honestly, that's a fair question to sit with. That night, one of the friends called the Coast Guard to report Nolan missing. Separately, his mother called the sheriff's office, frantic. Around midnight, his parents ended up meeting an officer in a McDonald's parking lot just to give details about their son. At one point, Nolan's father stepped outside, frustrated, and overheard one of the friends on the phone with a girl who'd been hanging around the group earlier. That girl mentioned something small, but strange. Nolan's keys were sitting on top of an Xbox back at the house. Not in his pocket. Not with him. On top of an Xbox. Early Sunday morning, Christine posted on Facebook asking people to be on the lookout for her son. Say it was unclear if he'd even made it back to land. Can you imagine sending that message about your own child? By this point, this wasn't just one agency looking for him anymore. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the U.S. Coast Guard, Gulf Islands National Seashore, and volunteers from the United Cajun Navy all joined the search. One of the Cajun Navy leaders later told CNN the beach that day had been packed with people, some of them drinking, and that strong rip currents in that area could easily overpower somebody in the water. For 2 days, Nolan's family waited. Then on the morning of July 6th, a National Park Service ranger found him, face down in the water, right off the northwestern tip of Horn Island. Christine confirmed it on Facebook that same day. She wrote that she and Nolan's father, Elmore, along with their whole family, were absolutely devastated. She said her heart was broken for her sweet son, and that she kept waiting for him to walk through the door with his beautiful smile and a joke, of course. The coroner said there were no obvious, immediate signs of trauma on Nolan's body, but because of the condition he was found in, and because of how unclear the circumstances were, the case was sent straight to the state medical examiner for a full autopsy, specifically to check for foul play. And here's the part that made the story explode nationally. Very early on, the sheriff's department said publicly that no foul play was suspected before toxicology, before an official cause of death. Nolan's mother said that alone made her deeply uncomfortable. "Why are we so quick to rush to this?" she asked. Because remember, Nolan was the only black young man in a mostly white friend group in Mississippi, a state with a long, painful history around race. That detail did not go unnoticed, and it's a huge part of why this case has exploded into a national conversation instead of staying a local tragedy. Then, the family's attorney, civil rights lawyer Ben Crump, revealed something that made the whole timeline even messier. A video had been circulating online, recorded near Horn Island that day, with someone yelling like they're in a heated argument. One friend, Traciston, said publicly that the voice yelling in that video was actually his own, not Nolan's. But Crump said his team has a different piece of video, one where you can reportedly hear Nolan himself, asking for his phone back, with people on the island identifying that voice as his. And speaking of the phone, Nolan didn't have it with him out on the island. It had been left behind on the boat. His mother tracked its location using the Life 360 app and got to it before police did. By the time the family had it in their hands, they believed some messages had already been deleted. Because the family didn't trust they were getting the whole truth from local investigators, they made a major move. They flew Nolan's body to Washington, D.C. for an independent autopsy, paid for in part by former NFL player Colin Kaepernick, done by a doctor with zero ties to Mississippi law enforcement. Reverend Al Sharpton stood beside the family at press conferences calling for transparency. Filmmaker Tyler Perry stepped in to help cover funeral costs. Even Spike Lee reportedly showed his support. Now here's the twist that just landed, and it's the biggest development in this case yet. On July 15th, the family and Ben Crump sat down face-to-face with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath, and she confirmed something huge. Once the sheriff's investigation is complete, this entire case is going to a grand jury. Now, before you get ahead of yourselves, a grand jury doesn't mean charges are guaranteed. It simply means a panel of everyday citizens will review all the evidence prosecutors have gathered and decide whether there's enough probable cause to move forward criminally. But think about what that actually signals. Officials aren't just quietly closing this out as an accidental drowning and moving on. They're putting it in front of a jury of citizens to make that call. That's not standard for every drowning case that happens on a Mississippi beach. At that same meeting, both sides agreed to something important: a joint inspection of Nolan's phone. Crump's team and law enforcement experts will examine it together, side by side, so that nobody can claim evidence was hidden or altered. Crump has also pushed for investigators to check the phones belonging to Nolan's friends, not just his. And then came the GPS data. CBS News obtained official tracking information from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources for the boat Nolan's friends were on, and it lines up with that sinking boat call almost to the minute. The boat left the dock around 9:56 in the morning, arrived at Horn Island by 11:14. It left the island at 4:31 p.m., matching the "we're sinking" call. It got back to the dock, moved briefly into Fort Bayou, returned to the dock again by 6:06 p.m. Then at 7:19 p.m., it shows up again at the Fort Bayou boat launch. Except this time, the tracking data shows the boat moving over land. It had been towed to the home of the boat's owners in Biloxi. So the timeline technically checks out with what the friends told investigators. But it still leaves the biggest question of all completely unanswered. If the boat really was sinking, why didn't anyone go back for Nolan once it was fixed? Why did an entire night pass before anyone alerted his mother? Nolan's father, Elmore, said it best in an interview with Good Morning America. He said he and Christine always taught their son one simple rule. If you go with a group, you stay with a group. And on July 4th, that rule was broken, and nobody has fully explained why. So here's what I want you to sit with. Why do two separate people, Katie and the boys, tell two completely different stories about the last real thing Nolan said before he disappeared? Why did it take hours, not minutes, for anyone to realize he never made a home? Why were his keys left sitting on top of an Xbox instead of in his pocket? And if hundreds of people were out on that island that day, how does an 18-year-old just disappear without a single person noticing? We still don't have the autopsy results. We still don't have a confirmed cause of death. But we do know this case is now headed toward a grand jury, and that alone tells you officials don't think the story is finished either. If this case has you thinking, drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you believe really happened out on that island. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to Crime Files with that bell icon turned on, because we're going to keep following this case as it develops. And you do not want to miss what comes next.